Welcome to Criminal Stories. The wind howled between the concrete buildings, carrying with it a winter chill that seeped into the bones. The flickering lights of the lampposts barely illuminated the empty streets, creating a gloomy and desolate atmosphere. Night had fallen over the city like a blanket of darkness, hiding its darkest secrets and bringing with it a palpable sense of unease in the air. On a deserted and poorly lit street, a flicker of movement caught the attention of a lone passerby. As they approached, the figure shuddered upon discovering the macabre sight. It was the body of a young woman carelessly left behind, as if her life had held no value. Her pale and cold skin contrasted with the dark pavement, and her eyes, still open, reflected the horror of her final moments, frozen in an expression of indescribable fear. News of the discovery spread quickly, engulfing the community in a whirlwind of fear and uncertainty. Conversations filled with speculation and anxious whispers as people tried to grasp the magnitude of the tragedy. Who could be capable of such an atrocity? Authorities found themselves facing an enigma that seemed to have no solution. Each new revelation only added more questions to the endless list of unknowns. Who was the victim? Why had no one seen or heard anything? The case of Junko Furuta was about to shake the foundations of the city, revealing a plot of unimaginable evil. The media echoed the horror in images of Junko Furuta's lifeless body spread everywhere, sowing a sense of panic that could not be contained. The once peaceful and united community fragmented into a tangle of suspicion and fear. Doors were locked earlier, and parents watched over their children with worried eyes. The flashing lights of police patrols became a constant presence in the streets, but the sense of security that had once been taken for granted had evaporated. The questions piled up like shadows in the dark. Who was the victim? Why had no one seen or heard anything? How could something so horrific have happened in the middle of a community that knew each other so well? As authorities tried to piece together the puzzle, Junko Furuta's story began to emerge, revealing details that only deepened the mystery. She was a bright and cheerful high school student with no apparent enemies, someone who radiated kindness and light. But her last days had been shrouded in a veil of unimaginable horror and suffering. The investigation began with a diligence that reflected the seriousness of the case. The young victim was quickly identified as Junko Furuta, a high school student known for her academic brilliance and cheerful spirit. However, what had happened in the last 44 days of her life was a mystery wrapped in a nightmare. The detectives assigned to the case, led by the astute Inspector Nakamura, plunged into a labyrinth of confusing clues and contradictory testimonies. Each new revelation added a layer of complexity, and time became a relentless enemy. The first step was to trace Junko's movements in the days before her disappearance. Friends and family described a girl with no apparent enemies, someone who radiated kindness and generosity. Her mother, with tears in her eyes, spoke of her daughter's dreams and aspirations, while her classmates recalled her contagious laughter and willingness to help others. But as the investigation progressed, disturbing details began to emerge. It was discovered that Junko had last been seen in the company of a group of boys her age, known for their problematic behavior. Nakamura and his team began to follow this lead, interrogating each member of the group. The initial interviews with the boys were unfruitful. Their answers were evasive, and some even seemed to be hiding information. Nakamura, with his sharp intuition, sensed there was more behind their nervous looks and uncomfortable silences. The pressure mounted with each passing day, and the community demanded answers. The first tangible clue came when one of the boys, weighed down by guilt, mentioned an abandoned house on the outskirts of the city. This revelation led Nakamura and his team to investigate the location, finding disturbing traces that suggested Junko had been held there. The house, with its worn walls and broken windows, became the setting of unspeakable terror. Food scraps, torn clothing, and Junko's personal belongings were scattered on the floor, painting a picture of desperation and suffering. With this new information, Nakamura intensified the interviews, focusing on the contradictions and gaps in the boys' stories. The inspector's persistence paid off when another group member, overwhelmed by fear and guilt, confessed that they had been manipulated by a charismatic leader. This individual, who appeared harmless at first glance, had exerted a sinister influence over the group, leading them to participate in acts of unimaginable cruelty. Each confession added a new layer to the horror Junko had endured. Nakamura and his team worked tirelessly to reconstruct the events of those 44 days. They uncovered a pattern of abuse and torture, a series of atrocious acts that defied all understanding. The web of lies and twisted loyalties began to unravel, and the true extent of the crime came to light. The interviews revealed a disturbing pattern of behavior. The boys seemed to be caught in a web of dark secrets and twisted loyalties, a closed circle where the truth was hidden under layers of lies and complicity. Nakamura noticed that each of them had an alibi, but there was a constant in their stories: a quiet and reserved boy, someone who didn't quite fit in with the group of troublemakers. This individual, whose name was Hiroshi, immediately caught Nakamura's attention. Something in his demeanor, his unshakable calm and empty gaze, told the inspector he needed to dig deeper into his life. The investigation focused on him, but Hiroshi maintained a serene attitude, and his alibi seemed unbreakable. His behavior during the interrogations was unsettling. He showed no signs of nervousness or guilt. Each answer seemed rehearsed, almost mechanical, as if he had prepared his defense in advance. This air of absolute control raised even more suspicion in Nakamura. Meanwhile, the detectives found evidence pointing to a specific place: an abandoned house on the outskirts of the city. They had received an anonymous tip leading them to investigate the building, a place that had once been a cozy home but was now in ruins and forgotten. With a mix of anticipation and dread, Nakamura and his team headed to the location, aware that they might be about to uncover a crucial piece of the puzzle. What they found there was a scene that defies all description: a dark and filthy room with leftover food and Junko's personal belongings scattered on the floor. It was evident that the girl had been held there against her will, and what she had suffered was beyond imaginable. The room, with its marked walls and corners filled with trash, seemed a silent testimony to the horror unleashed within. There were adhesive tapes, ropes, and other implements suggesting forced and prolonged confinement. Nakamura and his team worked meticulously, collecting each fragment of evidence with great care. Among the findings, they discovered a series of handwritten notes, likely by Junko, describing her despair and suffering. These notes were a silent cry for help, a heartbreaking window into her ordeal. Furthermore, forensic analyses revealed DNA traces matching several of the group's boys, including Hiroshi. However, Nakamura knew he needed more concrete proof to unravel the truth behind this crime. The pressure grew as the community demanded answers and justice. Nakamura, driven by his responsibility and the desire to bring justice to Junko, continued digging into the details. He used every resource at his disposal, from surveillance techniques to psychological analysis, to uncover the truth. He knew that behind Hiroshi's calm facade lay a twisted and dangerous mind, and he was determined to expose the true magnitude of his evil. The forensic analyses revealed DNA traces matching several of the group's boys, including Hiroshi, but Nakamura knew he needed more solid evidence to uncover the full truth behind this crime. The fragments of evidence weren't enough to decipher the full extent of the evil committed. The investigation grew more complex as new layers of dark secrets were discovered. He continued interrogating the suspects, trying to break down the barriers of silence and lies they had built. Each interrogation session was a battle of wills, where Nakamura deployed his skill in detecting inconsistencies and pressing the boys to reveal the truth. The nervous glances and evasive answers began to wear down under the inspector's sharp insight. It was a psychological war, and Nakamura knew he had to remain firm and patient to untangle the knot of complicity hiding the truth. Finally, a crack appeared in Hiroshi's armor. One of the group members, overwhelmed by guilt and fear, confessed that Hiroshi had been the main instigator of Junko's abduction and torture. The young man, with tears in his eyes and a trembling voice, recounted the events with heartbreaking clarity. According to his account, Hiroshi had manipulated the others, using his dark charisma to control them. He had created an atmosphere of intimidation and forced loyalty, where every act of cruelty was presented as a test of devotion to the group. The revelation of this fact left Nakamura with a feeling of horror and relief. The inspector was now face to face with the mastermind who had orchestrated a nightmare of suffering and torture. He knew he had the missing piece to solve the case, but the emotional toll was immense. The confessions detailed a series of atrocious acts that defied human comprehension. Nakamura felt the weight of pain and injustice, aware that the scars from this case would be deep and lasting. With the confession in hand, Nakamura was able to connect all the dots. Hiroshi had used his influence to turn the boys into pawns of his evil, directing each move with meticulous precision. The disturbing details of Junko's torture and suffering revealed the depth of the darkness Hiroshi had implanted in his followers. Nakamura, although satisfied to have unmasked the culprit, couldn't help but feel overwhelmed by the magnitude of the horror uncovered. Justice had finally prevailed, but the inspector knew that the path to healing for Junko and her family would be long and painful. The echo of Hiroshi's crimes would resonate throughout the community, reminding everyone of the fragility of innocence and the need to fight darkness with every fiber of their being. Nakamura vowed to continue seeking justice for those who had suffered, keeping Junko's memory alive with every step he took. With the confession obtained, Nakamura was able to piece together the complete puzzle. Hiroshi had orchestrated the entire crime, driven by a mix of resentment and a sick desire for power. Using his influence over the others, he had turned Junko's life into an endless nightmare, keeping her captive and subjecting her to unimaginable tortures. The group of boys trapped in Hiroshi's web of manipulation had participated in the atrocious acts, blinded by fear and misunderstood loyalty. Hiroshi's and his accomplices' trial was a public spectacle, with each macabre detail exposed to the community's eyes. Hiroshi's serenity during the trial puzzled everyone, as if he didn't understand the magnitude of his actions. When the sentence was finally handed down, the punishment was severe, reflecting the gravity of the crime committed. However, even with justice served, the shadow of Junko Furuta's case continued to haunt the community. The city's streets, once filled with life and joy, were now marked by a sense of loss and sadness. The townspeople tried to move on, but the emotional scars ran deep, and the lingering fear served as a constant reminder of the fragility of the security they had once taken for granted. Conversations in markets and cafes still revolved around the horror of the case, and families watched over their children with renewed concern. Nakamura, although relieved to have solved the case, couldn't escape the weight of the horror he had uncovered. The images of the abandoned house, the confessions of the boys, and Junko's suffering were engraved in his mind, creating a burden he knew he would carry forever. Every time he closed his eyes, the shadows of those dark days returned to his mind, reminding him of the cruelty that can exist in the human heart. He knew that Junko's memory would remain with him forever, a constant reminder of the evil that can hide behind the most innocent facade. The story of Junko Furuta's terrible case was a testament to the struggle between darkness and justice, and how the truth, no matter how painful, must come to light. The community, united by pain and hope, found the strength to heal, but would always carry with it the memory of the young girl whose life was so cruelly taken. Memorials in her honor became places of reflection and solidarity, where people could pay tribute to Junko and renew their commitment to protect the vulnerable. Justice had prevailed, but the echo of the crime would forever resonate in the hearts of those who had witnessed its horror. Nakamura continued his work as an inspector, but with a renewed determination to protect his community and never allow such suffering to occur again. Every new case he investigated carried the weight of Junko's memory, driving him to seek justice with unbreakable intensity. The story of Junko Furuta became a grim warning and a call to action, reminding everyone of the importance of being vigilant and never underestimating the capacity of evil to infiltrate their lives. Despite the pain and sadness, the community found the strength to move forward, united by the memory of a young girl whose life, though cut short, left an indelible mark on the hearts of all.